Okay, I will call this meeting to order at 7:05. We are not saying the Pledge of Allegiance because we're not in person. I'm sorry. We need to approve the agenda. If I can have a motion.
So moved. This is Liz.
Thank you. A second? Thank you, Glenn. Okay. I have an addition. I wanted to, Anne had sent out the 11:20 minutes of our goal meeting, and I was hoping we could approve those. Is there an issue with us adding that, Dave? Sorry, just when you were taking a step.
If the board approves the addition to the agenda,
Okay.
you're in
All right.
good shape.
Okay. That's the only thing that I wanted to add in. Does anyone else have any additions or changes? Okay. That said, could I have a show of hands for people approving the agenda, please? Bruce? Asha? Do we have hands up for approval of the agenda?
Yes, hand is up.
Okay, sorry. I must have frozen screens. So sorry. I think that's unanimous. Thank you. Now we have public input and announcements. We had a very nice, oh, thank you. Anne reminded me that I'm supposed to do a roll call. Okay. Maria, did you vote yes? I'm going to go through, and if people would just audibly.
Yes, I
Okay.
voted yes.
I think,
Thank you.
Adrian, I
What?
think it's only if it's not unanimous. Do we
I
have
wasn't
to do?
absolutely sure it was unanimous, Anne, because I couldn't
Oh,
see
gotcha.
everybody. So, I mean, could somebody see everybody?
Can we just ask for if anyone does
Okay,
not
is
approve the
anybody not
agenda?
approving? Thank you. Cool. Okay, this is the one thing about these virtual meetings. Okay, so I started to say that we had a very nice response. Somebody that had some concerns about our the school's COVID response, and if there's no objections, I'd like to read it into the, read it for the public. I'll do that. Thank you for contacting us and sharing your perspective as a parent of a school-age child. I can certainly understand and appreciate your frustration. I will pass on your concerns to the appropriate team for their consideration. In response to your questions, I would like to ask that you consider another perspective. First, I would like to challenge the assertion that, quote, this disease does not impact kids of that age in any sort of meaningful way according to the data on hand. I asked the Department of Health data team for current statistics on COVID-19 in children and was told the following, quote, since the beginning of July 2021, pediatric cases under the age of 12 have made up roughly 20% of our cases. Since July 2021, 10 cases under age 12 have been hospitalized. We are also currently aware of 47 outbreaks throughout the state linked to a school or childcare. From what I conclude, this disease does not indeed impact kids in a very meaningful way. By extension, no doubt, I'm going to read that sentence again. From that, I conclude that this disease does indeed impact kids in a very meaningful way. By extension, no doubt the parents and families of those 10 hospitalized pediatric cases have been deeply impacted. Though it may have been true that children were less likely to incur severe disease with the original form and earlier variants of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, that is not necessarily true with the current Delta variant, and the science is not yet available for the newly emerged Omicron variant. Furthermore, children who become infected with COVID-19 do not do so in a vacuum. They generally live with other people in a household and interact with other adults, such as teachers, members of their faith community, and caregivers. In turn, each exposed person has the potential to expose and infect other people, which may include those who are vulnerable due to advanced age, underlying medical conditions, or immunosuppression. This is particularly a concern with highly transmissible variants such as Delta and Omicron. Since runny nose and coughing are included on the list of possible symptoms of COVID-19, those symptoms must be responded to as a potential indicator of an active infection. Additionally, even if a child's symptoms are due to a common cold, if they pass this cold to a caregiver or teacher, that person won't be able to work if they become symptomatic, which jeopardizes the overall education child care enterprise. For the 21-22 academic year, school districts have been granted the authority to set requirements and procedures to safeguard the health of students, staff, and their broader community. I would therefore encourage you to communicate with your local school board as they work to develop policies that are effective and achievable. For our part, the Vermont Department of Health and the Agency of Education have partnered to develop plans to help more students stay in school when possible. You can find out more about these plans here. One plan already in place is the Test to Stay program. If the school wants to participate in this program, they only need to complete a few required steps. Likewise, a similar program is under discussion for children enrolled in childcare programs. It's probably safe to say all Vermonters are frustrated with the pandemic in general and would like nothing more for it to be resolved so we can go about our lives. But our brave healthcare workers are also weary and frustrated with the constant stress of dealing with the health effects of the pandemic. We don't need to tell them that they have been dealing with this in their workplace for almost 2 years. The stress of helping patients survive a life-threatening disease is taking its toll among healthcare workers statewide. We owe it to them and to ourselves to do whatever we can to stem the spread of this disease. Thank you. And that was answered by somebody in the COVID-19 public inquiries team at the Vermont Department of Health. I felt it was reasonable to share this response to a parent concern. And I wanted to stress that the board knows that all of the actions that we're taking to keep kids safe are, I can only say, troublesome, frustrating, aggravating. They impede your normal life, but we're doing it with good purpose. And with that, I will open us up to public comment. I do not have a list.
Yeah, we just have one person signed up tonight. That's
Okay.
Nan Dubin, and I believe I saw Nan is with us on the
Okay,
meeting.
Nan, you have the floor.
Thank you. Nan Dubin, East Wallingford. Having recently watched with dismay the lowlights of the recent Rutland school board meeting, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that this board works together with respect for each other and integrity, even when you have differences, and you move forward getting the work of the board done on behalf of our students. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nan. I guess if we have no other public comment, seeing nobody's hand coming up, is there any board discussion of Nan's very nice comment? If not, I'll move on. Okay, I see nobody. So we have approval of minutes from 12/1. And that is our last board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. This is Liz.
Thank you, Liz. Is there a second?
Len is seconding.
Okay, thank you, Len.
Seconding.
Confusing. You guys aren't, it'd be nice to be able to group people together. Are there any additions, corrections, or anything like that? Seeing none, could we please have a show of hands? I'll try it again to approve the minutes.
Adrienne, I'm just going to say that I'll abstain just because I wasn't present.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Did everybody else approve? Please speak up if you did not. Okay, then, Ann, did you get that? We had one abstention and everyone else approved. Okay, we also need to approve the minutes of 11/20, which was our Saturday morning board retreat to work on goals. And I did want to stress, and I'm trying to find on my page, on the minutes, if you guys are all looking at them, the board communication plan that we came up with, and maybe open that up if there was any controversy on that. I guess first we'll take a motion to approve the 11/20 minutes. I'm sorry. Thank you, Sam. Is there a second? Andrea, thank you. So for people that weren't at the retreat, especially, but even those at the retreat, is that pretty much what we agreed to? Okay. Well, Sam, do you have a comment? Or are you, she's frozen with her hand up. Sorry, on my machine.
Sorry, Shrewsbury internet. Sorry about that.
No, it's terrible. If there's no other comments about those minutes, I would like everybody to, take the time to read the communications thing. Make sure you're checking your emails. That would be wonderful. And we'll try and keep to this plan. which would be great. So do we have approval of these minutes? Please speak up if you do not approve. How's that? Is there any abstentions? Okay, and we consider that unanimous. And now we have student member update. And Tyler, I think
Yeah.
that's you.
Yep, that is me. Good evening. How's everyone doing?
Fine, I think.
Good. That's a good thing. So our last board meeting, our last regular board meeting, we had 3 students, Sydney Mosier, Chris Burnett, and Lacey Lamphere attend. Chris is a senior, and Sydney and Lacey are both juniors at Mill River Union High School. And, I had good discussions with them afterwards and the days after. And they were both really eager to jump on board. Or excuse me, all 3 were really eager to jump on board. And with that, I see no reason myself, and I want to put this to the board, to not have all 3 be on the board as student reps. There's always going to be something that could come up where one cannot make it, or maybe multiple can't make it, sporting events, whatever, musical events, extracurriculars. But I would like to put forth that all 3 who are on this call tonight would still like to participate and be on the board. So I see that Maria has a question. So go ahead. You're muted, Maria.
Thanks, Tyler. I don't actually have a question. I just want to say thank you to those 3 students for their interest and their commitment to this process. I think that's really commendable. And I would welcome having all 3 on the board. And I would suggest that maybe ideally, if circumstances permit, that we could have 2 of them at any given board meeting, because I really would appreciate their input.
I can say that, all 3 of them are on this meeting right now.
At least 2.
And when I mentioned, the first and third Wednesday of the month at 7:00, all just nodded and said, yeah, perfect, no problem. So I think I can anticipate all 3 being on our calls or in person quite regularly.
I think that's wonderful. Does anybody else have a comment? Len, go ahead.
Yeah, just a question. Adrian, do you have their emails just so that we make sure that they're getting the agendas and things ahead of time for the board meeting?
Yep, good idea.
Yeah.
I'll have Ann.
We'll go ahead.
Dan.
Sorry, actually, Len, I already talked with Ann about that. I just want Ann has that information and can forward that to him. I just wanted to make sure everything was fine with the board tonight before she did so. So on your call and the board's call, she will put that into place.
Ann, are you going to put them on the MRUUSD board group email, or will it be a separate one?
I thought I would put them on the extra interested party.
Okay. All right. Could you send all 3 to me? Because sometimes I'll send things out, informational things that I don't send through you necessarily. And I don't
Absolutely.
want to. Thank you very
Yes.
much. Appreciate that. So on that, thank you very much, Sydney, Chris, and I can't find the last.
Lacey.
I know, I'm trying to find her face. Okay, there she is. Lacey, thank you very much, you guys, for
Congratulations.
yes, and congratulations. But thank you very much for taking on this responsibility. We really appreciate it. Let's see. COVID-19 dynamics update.
Yes, that's me. If it's okay, I'll share my screen if you'll give me just a moment to prep and present that for you. All right. Thanks for the time to share with you tonight. An update, just a check-in in terms of where we are with our COVID response and precautions. As we all know, things are at an escalated state. We're seeing more cases in our area, in our community, in our schools than we have throughout the pandemic. And I felt like it's important to kind of paint the context for the board tonight and for the community on the differences between last school year and this school year when it comes to authority and decision-making in a few specific areas. And the reason I wanted to share this is because as we've watched the pandemic play out, frustration gets expressed when people are feeling like they are being infringed upon, lives are being affected, challenges are accumulating. And let's be honest, when you're just downright frustrated, sometimes that comes out. The frustrations that we experienced last year were different than the frustrations that we have experienced this year. And I would say that has to do with how the pandemic has played out. And I'll try to share what I mean by that. There are three buckets that I organize kind of pandemic response into. The first at the top here is the regulatory bucket. So these are the rules around what makes a school day and what makes a school year. So the number of school days required by the state in order to count a year, that according to statute is 175 days. The definition of what it means for a student to be in attendance, and the decision on whether or not a school can be in remote status, hybrid status, or in-person status. The second bucket I want to focus on with you is the operational realm, and that's just a word that I've made up. This is not Gary Marcy's realm, although his work does touch on this, but this is the decisions that are made around what are the protocols in school in terms of protecting people, masking, health screenings, social distancing. Are visitors allowed? Do we have events? Do we have sporting events? Are spectators allowed in those events? Those are kind of the operational decisions. And then finally, the third bucket is the public health domain. These involve the management and communication with the community about school-based cases, the determination of close contacts and assigning close contacts to individuals and communicating about those, and assigning quarantine when it's necessary. Now, it's really important when we look at these three buckets to look at how the authority has shifted. So first, if we are looking at 2020 and 2021, what I just highlighted there, in the regulatory framework in terms of how many school days constitute a year, what does attendance mean, and what are you going to be, remote, in-person, et cetera, there's a combination of authority there. Because of the state of emergency, districts were given some discretion to make some of those decisions locally, and we were given that discretion by the state. So as an example, the state last year said that we could actually count a school year if it was only 170 days as opposed to 175. The state last year, under the state of emergency, said each school district can decide what being in attendance means in a remote context, and each school district decided what process they were going to use to make that determination. And each school district, based on its circumstances, can decide whether to be remote, whether to have hybrid learning, or whether to be fully in person. And you know that we actually had variations of all three throughout the school year last year. The difference is this year, in the state of emergency being gone, all of that authority lies with the state. The number of school days is still held firm at 175. There's been no grace applied to that. It may come, but currently there's been no grace. The definition of students being in attendance has reverted to what the statute said prior to the pandemic. It has to do with more than 50% of your school has to be in attendance, have to be physically in the building more than half the school day. And that's how you count whether or not someone is at school or not. And finally, the concept of remote learning from a technical standpoint does not exist as an option for us to pursue at this time. That could change. It could be that in the coming weeks, the state will give us the flexibility where superintendents and boards working with superintendents could make a decision and say, you know what, we're going to go remote for a stretch, or we're going to go hybrid. Right now, if we made a decision to go remote, let's say between now and the break beginning in 5 school days, we would be gambling that those 5 school days would have to be made up in June. We'd be gambling with approaching the 4th of July without even having had actual snow days occurring as of yet. So I want you to understand that the authority we had last year to make that determination does not exist this year. In the operational realm, last year, you know that we had a about 45, 50-page set of guidance and guidelines that told schools exactly what they had to do with regard to these things. Everything was spelled out. Every rule was detailed. We had to follow that to the letter. This year, absent the state of emergency, the state said, you can make those decisions at the district level this year. If you look at this list, Only one of these items have we made what would be called an aggressively proactive stance on, and I made that term up just now, but that is masking. I made a recommendation to you earlier in the school year, and the board decided that having this school year with masking, we'd hoped for a short period of time, but we said until it was no longer necessary, we have required masking in our schools, as is the case in every district in the state, with the exception of one, which is up in the Northeast Kingdom. The other areas on this list, health screenings before school, social distancing, visitors allowed, events, sports, spectators, those things are all things that we have not put any restrictions on this year and have tried to operate in normal conditions. The state allowed us the flexibility to make those determinations this year. Now I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes, because the key that for tonight's sharing, the key to understand is last year, this is what people got upset about with us. Your remote learning system is affecting me, my child, my family in significant ways. That was the primary source of frustration. It was not quarantine, and it was not how we navigated COVID cases. This year, the frustration that we experience is all about the public health response. And it's really important that the board understand we've never had discretion with how we implement the public health response. In the pandemic, schools are essentially an extension or an arm of the public health agency, which is the Vermont Department of Health. We receive very clear protocols, very clear algorithms and expectations that we have to follow. That was the case last school year. That was the case this school year. The challenge with that is when we have more cases and when we have more students who have to face quarantine, and when decisions that individuals and families make related to vaccination or no vaccination, when those all start to play into that, the outcomes can feel different for people based on decisions that they've made. And so we right now are seeing a lot of tension. Even in the last few days, we're seeing significant tension, some pretty vehement and outspoken about decisions that people feel are unfair. We have been told by people that the Department of Health says that we have discretion to decide how we're going to do things. And there's some interesting confusion there, because when the Department of Health shares that districts have local decisions to make, they're talking about this. They're not talking about us having the ability to change the public health rules. So it's very, very important that the board understand clearly that the protocols we follow are to the letter of what is prescribed to us by the Department of Health. Final piece I'd like to share on this is really, if we distill this situation down to talking about individuals and individual liberties and individual rights, I'd like for you to think about it this way. Making a decision to tell anyone that they are required to quarantine is a pretty significant decision. And it actually affects someone's right to freely move throughout society, because they're being directed by the schools as an extension of the public health agency to restrict their movement through society. That's a big, big deal. I've actually heard arguments this week that we should extend those restrictions to people that are not required to quarantine if they happen to be a close contact of a case. The problem is we don't have the authority as an extension of the public health agency to affect people's rights beyond what the public health agency requires. So I'll just say that again for clarity. State government, through the public health agency, of which we are an extension, directs us in terms of how people are to be impacted with their movement throughout society. We are not in a position to change those rules, add to those rules, or take away from those rules. And that creates tension that affects people in their families, in their personal lives, in their work lives, et cetera. I think we all know, and Adrian, you spoke to this at the beginning of the meeting during the public comment. We all know that we are all frustrated and exhausted by the state of the pandemic. That goes for the health providers that were mentioned in that letter, and it certainly goes for the educators who are with our students every day, and it goes for our nurses who are involved in contact tracing and contacting families. I want the board to know that I'm impressed with and proud of our team. Our folks are working their tails off to be tidy, thorough, consistent, and fair. Even though when this is happening to you, in terms of quarantine, it doesn't feel fair. And it certainly doesn't feel like something that you deserve. But it's important for you to know that your folks are on top of it, and we're doing the absolute best that we can. And I'd be happy to take any comments or questions related to anything I shared or anything else in the COVID context.
I have a question. I'd like to know if there's a case identified at a school in a classroom, what is the protocol? What is the state protocol if someone is identified as having COVID?
Yeah, so in really simple terms, Bruce, and I can have our health folks send you the really excruciating detail, but in really simple terms, if a case is identified as having been in a school, we are notified. Sometimes we're notified by a parent, sometimes we're notified by the Department of Health, but we are notified. And when we become aware of that case, our team has to start working on that case. You would be flabbergasted at the number of hours outside the workday and on the weekends that our folks are involved in contact tracing. Contact tracing involves making determinations of who was in a position where they could or might be a close contact and researching what the actual situation was. It involves interviewing teachers. It involves sometimes talking to students. It involves talking to the individual who was the positive case. It involves early communication with the family of the positive case to make sure that all the details are solid. Once the school has a sense of who the individuals that are involved in the case are, we have to make determinations of whether someone's a close contact or not. That is actually impacted. The outcome of that is affected by someone's vaccine status. So in the event that, let's say there are 10 students or 10 individuals who are close contacts of a positive case, if those students are vaccinated, they are not required to quarantine according to the state's rules. They are recommended to get a test after a certain specific amount of time. Those families are contacted and they are notified of that fact. Anyone who's unvaccinated in that context is directed to quarantine in accordance with Vermont Department of Health's guidelines. And they are informed that they are in a 14-day quarantine. However, they can test out of that quarantine after 7 days with a negative PCR test. A new addition we have that actually began in recent weeks is the test to stay protocol, which Adrian mentioned previously. The test to stay protocol is a great option for us that we've been able to utilize. That applies only to unvaccinated close contacts who do not have symptoms. So let's imagine that I'm a student in a 3rd grade class. I'm not vaccinated, but I was a close contact. I can come to school each morning. I can be tested. And if I have a negative test, I can stay at school. If I have a positive test, I become a positive case, and that has to be treated as a new case, which is a whole different layer of things. To take it a bit further, if I'm an unvaccinated close contact and I'm involved in the test to stay program and I'm able to stay at school because I don't have symptoms and I'm testing negative, one restriction that is pretty significant is if I'm involved in sports, as an example, I can practice with my team, but I'm not allowed to participate in any inter-school competition. There's not allowed to be any intermingling of students from different schools that are involved in the test to stay program. So I hope that kind of gave a broad picture of it, Bruce. I'd be happy to.
Yes. So I just want to be clear. So say I'm unvaccinated and I'm in a classroom and the kid next to me has been tested for COVID, so I'm sent home. Right?
It really depends, Bruce. It's not that simple.
Well, suppose I was one of the lucky ones to be chosen to be sent home.
Well,
okay, the health
luck and being chosen I would are not words I would use to describe this, but I do want to be a little more clear for you. There are distinctions in terms of what time duration makes someone a close contact. So as an example, if someone is in a room together with a positive case for more than 4 hours, everyone in the room is automatically a close contact according to the Department of Health. If someone is within 6 feet of an individual for a span of 15 minutes in 24 hours, you see that more at the middle school and high school level with the way the Mill River building operates. Those individuals are designated as close contacts. And then the response for them as close contacts is dictated by their vaccine status, whether or not they are quarantined or whether they're allowed to not go into quarantine.
Okay, so I'm quarantined, right? So I have to go home for 7 days.
You have to go home for 14 days, but you can test out after 7 if you're unsymptomatic and you have a negative PCR test.
But is it possible for me to test out the next day.
Yes, you can show up at school if you have no symptoms. If you have symptoms,
Right.
you're at home. If you have no symptoms, you will be tested each morning, and as long as you're negative, you are back at school.
Okay, that's perfect. Secondly, suppose I'm unfortunate enough to have to stay at home for the 7 days because I developed a runny nose or whatever. Is work sent to me by my teachers so I can maintain where I am in the classroom?
Yeah, great question, Bruce. And the good thing is you know the answer. We expect all of our teachers to be operating weekly modules, which means that our teachers are prepping for the week, and regardless of a student's location, they know what's going on. And we also expect that the teachers are in contact with families to make sure that students are moving forward. You know, I can think of some examples in elementary schools in particular where we've had a lot of cases where you might have a student or two who are at school working with the teacher because they're not quarantined, but the other students in the class are at home because they are either positive cases or quarantined, and there's communication between the teacher and the families as needed. And my recommendation to anyone on this call, or anyone who becomes aware of a situation where someone's not getting the information, my request would be reach out to the teacher immediately. And if you're not getting the information that you need, reach out next to the school principal. And if you're still not getting the information you need, reach out to Brian Hill, the assistant superintendent, or to me, the superintendent.
Okay, so last question. Is there a particular place that teachers post their modules? Do they use Blackboard? Do they use what do they use?
My belief is most of those at the upper grade levels are posted on Google Classroom. At the elementary level, there may be a couple other programs, especially at the primary grades, that I couldn't cite the exact name for you, but Google Classroom is the primary location for that, Bruce. If any of the folks on the administrative team have better information on that, feel free to interrupt me.
Yeah, this is Jody. I'll just jump in. So everybody at 712 is using Google Classroom again this year. We allowed flexibility at the elementary level based on developmental level and teacher need this year. And so the choices are it will be coming via, it goes via email, via Seesaw, or via Google Classroom, depending on that class.
Oh, I do have one more question. Suppose I want to come get tested out because I feel healthy, and I go to school. Where do I go? Do I go straight to the nurse? Do I go to the office?
Well, so when you walk in that building, they're going to know that you're on quarantine, so they're going to be there ready to test you when you show up. So okay. Walking in the door to the main office and being connected with the nurses right away will just happen as a part of normal operations.
Got it.
But I do want to stress, and it's important because it took me a while to get it straight too, Bruce, that test to stay option is only for unvaccinated folks that have been directed to quarantine who don't have any symptoms. I had an individual in the district related to a quarantine that they were vaccinated, and so they didn't have to quarantine because they were vaccinated, but they said, hey, can I do the test to stay? And the answer is no, we're actually not allowed to do that. The state gives us very clear directions on how those tests are supposed to be used and who's eligible to get them. You know, we're not purchasing those tests, they're given to us by the state. So we make an effort to make sure that we're super tight on the protocols for that.
I'm gonna jump in here. David, I also believe that the family needs to opt in to test to stay.
Yeah, great point, BJ. Thank you. We've sent home a few times, and actually I think the elementary principals and Mill River principal are sending home another letter either today or tomorrow that updates folks on the online links that people have to go to sign their children up. We've found in some cases, BJ, where we have a case and people need to be quarantined, and as we're talking to those families, part of that conversation is, hey, listen, if your child is signed up, you know, through the link, we can actually do the test to stay tomorrow. So that has motivated some families to participate in that process.
Okay. The other thing I was going to ask is, I'm trying to find the information that you're relaying to me on our websites, and I can't. I'm wondering if we should have a better website presence that even outlines, you know, a couple of things that you have in your the stuff that's operational versus links to the public health that we're following, some guidelines, even the email addresses of the nurses of each school. Because I honestly don't even know who Wallingford's is. And so I always go through Dan or the or their teacher, but I'm thinking some communications on the website that people can easily find might help out a lot in answering questions like what Bruce has said.
Yeah, so BJ, I think that's valid and worth some conversation. I would say you can get the nurses' information for Wallingford on the Wallingford website, but it's worth us having some conversations internally about how to best accumulate the information. You know that I send out information at least a couple times a week, and every time we have a positive case, we send out form letters with all the links and all the guidance and all the resources. But it might be worth us having a conversation about how to house that in a separate location as well. So we'll have some internal chat about that and see what we can figure out.
So I was going to stop. This is going with what BJ said. If I were to go to the website, I assume I could find that link to opt out or opt in to the testing. But where would I look?
I don't think that's a fair assumption to make, Bruce. We communicate directly with our families through email with all the information that they need, and we do it repeatedly. So to BJ's point, we'll have an internal conversation about whether it makes sense to try to house all that in one place. The challenge is sometimes the protocols change, sometimes the details change, sometimes the links change. So we don't want to create a static location where things are always changing on us. We need to be able to adapt as the health protocols from the state develop.
Yeah, I will say as a parent, even though I get your emails, I don't think about it until, let's say my kid is close contact at an outside place, and then I go looking for it. So that's the realm that I'm thinking of. It's like, okay, I know it was said somewhere, it's buried in my 2,000 emails. I want to go look for it. I just need to be able to find it. So.
Understood and appreciated. Thanks, BJ.
I'm muted. Are there other questions from any other board members? I don't see any hands. That was great. Thank you, everybody. Questions and answers. We have, if there is no further comment, we will move on to bylaws review, section 4. Dave, are you walking us through that?
Yeah, I'll share my screen again if that's okay with everyone. Please bear with me again a moment. Are folks able to read? All right, everyone able to read that? Perfect. So last time we met, you cranked through sections 1, 2, and 3. Section 4 is a little bit longer, but it's your only one on tap for tonight. So this is the section about the organization and the officers of the district. I'll just give you the big picture first. You can see, talks about reorganization, officers, details the officers, details the duties of the officers, spells out board chair, vice chair, clerk, then talks about committees, identifies our standing committees by name, and then addresses ad hoc committees and their ability to be created. So that's the scope of what we're looking at this evening. If it's okay with the group, last time we just kind of worked through one section at a time. And Adrian, if it's okay with you, would you like me to manage the dialogue, or do you want to manage it? What's your preference?
I think it's easier if you do it, just because you're answering the questions for the most part.
So why don't we just start with, let's look at sections A and B, and if anyone has any comments or questions or criticisms on sections A and B, be happy to take note of those. And I can only see about half of you with my screen shared, so please just speak up if you have something to share.
David, Lenny, just a question. Looking at B, if we're doing virtual, how are we going to do paper ballot?
That's a fabulous question, Len. Yeah, that's good.
And I don't even remember that we did paper ballots, but that's not my point. I mean, should we? Could
I break in, Len?
Yeah, absolutely.
This happened at the VSBA meeting to elect officers, and it's a very good thing to bring up because we were all flummoxed, and it took about 15 minutes to elect 3 people. which was really bad. But what we ended up doing was emailing to the, a disinterested person who would probably be, superintendent or whoever's handling the election. And they tallied it up and reported back so that people would still have anonymity. That was the best solution we came up with.
Yeah. I don't have a solution.
Any other solution?
Yeah, I don't have a solution. I just in looking at it.
Yeah, it worked, but it was time consuming.
And so can we, or should we, because I'm just trying to think, when we did the board chair, we were remote and the votes were just public, right? If I remember correctly.
Yes.
Right. I mean, it depends on whether you want to have a private vote or if you want to have an open vote. And if you want to do private, then you have to do something like email or text or emailing was easiest.
What about, I just typed in red, or paper ballot or via confidential electronic means, which I was trying to capture the concept of everyone could email an individual who would then tally those and wouldn't have names attached. Opinions?
As I said, that worked. So
Does that, and again, I go back to choosing a board chair, does that hamstring us in terms of moving on? Because when we do our reorganizational meeting or our organizational meeting,
it did.
We tend to move right along.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not opposed to that. I'm not trying to throw stuff out here, but I mean, I'm okay with voting public. I don't have an issue with that.
I think we could leave it up to the group at the time of the election.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can the provision allow for or confident, to determine it at the time of voting if an alternative method is needed?
Okay.
And honestly, I don't quite understand why it needs to be confidential. We had a very public vote for chair and vice chair and clerk, and I think that that's a helpful thing for our board, especially.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that's what we did at the VSBA because there was some people were interested in an anonymous vote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Could we have, so 3 choices, paper ballot? Because obviously it was intended in our bylaws that it be anonymous.
Right.
So if we follow through on the current bylaws, then you would have to do it with some kind of confidential emails, or we can change it the way Dave is writing it, which I'm fine with.
Could we say roll call instead of publicly?
Sure.
Yes.
Would that be possible?
Or roll call.
Roll call upon agreement of the members of the board.
I think that's
Yeah, how's that as written? Does that kind of hit everything?
Yep. That's fine. Cool. Sorry.
Great catch, Lynn. That's a good one.
I have a concern, I guess. Well, this year, there were like 4 or 5 new board members. And first night, we get thrown into, okay, who's the board chair? Who's the vice chair? We had no idea what those job responsibilities were. We didn't know, I didn't know you from anybody. So I'm sitting here voting for people. I have no idea who to vote for. So if you've got five new members and you have to vote in the first hour of a meeting, I think that's sort of counterproductive.
I guess what's your suggestion? I mean, that's the clincher.
I think there can be an honest expectation if you're going to be running for this office to get to know the board beforehand and get to know the folks on it and get to know what your duties and responsibilities are going to be before you're elected.
Or we can make a point and maybe put somewhere in the bylaws that there is a responsibility of maybe the current chair or the superintendent or whatever of at least sending out an expectation of what the first meeting entails. It wouldn't help somebody knowing people, but I don't know how you can solve that problem.
Yeah, and there's a little,
at least know what the process is going to be. So you're not
there was a little trickiness even this year with, I know, getting us all sworn in with the pandemic and whatnot. So it's not like it was perfectly, aces running through, but
that might be an expectation that we have somewhere else. I don't know if it needs to be in the bylaws, but I think it would be very nice if people understood what they're going to be asked to do in that first meeting.
That sounds like a really good thing for me to add to that,
The new
whatever document that I have for new board members.
I think that would be great.
I'll try to throw that in there. Thank you. I'll take note.
Yeah.
Well, somewhere, I mean, I recall after we took the first vote or second vote, I recall asking, what do these jobs entail?
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Dave started reading what they were. So, I mean, that should be posted somewhere here.
It could also be in Maria's thing that gets sent to new board members, a copy of the bylaws.
But and those duties are in the bylaws. I mean, they're right here. So in terms of, I guess the real question is, what does a newly elected board member, what's their obligation to be aware of what the board work is about? So
Well, you might not even know that there are bylaws, but I mean, I think Maria's document that she keeps adding to, that would be a great addition. You know, these are things you should read before the first meeting.
Am I correct to assume that the bylaws are a public document?
Mm-hmm. They're not easy to find.
Well, yeah.
It works best with like a Google search, and then suddenly they materialize. I have had tremendous trouble trying to find them without doing that. And I don't understand why, because they're right there. It's just, I can't find them.
I know the feeling. Some websites don't map out the way my brain would think they would either.
Yeah. So
thank goodness for searches.
I don't know. That's my thought. I think people running for office, people who want an office, you've got an advantage right away because you're on the board. You come into the meeting saying, all right, so-and-so we're going to put so-and-so here. We're going to put so-and-so here, and it's done. Whereas if your first meeting, if you have one person, it doesn't matter. I'm talking 4 or 5 new members. Whereas if you have that, I don't see that we've accomplished anything that first meeting that was so earth-shattering that it couldn't have waited till the next meeting to have the actual election.
but what if you have, like you have the 5 new board members and you don't have any of the existing officers still on the board? Who handles the meeting? I mean, there's some logistics there that are troublesome if you don't have, your entire slate of officers this year didn't run. So next March, what do you do?
I have my hand up. Can I
Oh, I'm
speak?
sorry, let's just start talking because we can't see everybody.
Oh, no, that's fine. So I just want to share with my fellow board members that a practice that is pretty standard. A practice that is pretty standard in senior leadership when you come into a new situation is that you spend the first, it can be a year observing. So, there's definitely an acclimation period. So again, standard practice in senior leadership in the private sector is, when CEOs or presidents, new directors come into new roles, they spend a predetermined period, whether it's a quarter or 2 quarters or an entire fiscal year, just getting the lay of the land and meeting the people and seeing how everything works. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, but I thought I would share that.
I'm wondering if we can do this more preemptive. And when it comes time for elections to happen, we send out specific invites, and really maybe the current chair talks to each of the potential incoming people to invite them to school board meetings while they're running. More, not necessarily a bylaw, but more of a practice that we're going to reach out to the potential board members sooner.
Could I add that maybe for the agenda for that first meeting, that, for example, documents such as this are like a link to and or the PDF of and printed and whatnot are made easily available. So we're not all having to go out and search on the website, but it's a part of that meeting warning.
Can I just make a suggestion? Just a suggestion for the group. I want to encourage you to keep in mind, you're talking about your bylaws right now, or we're talking about bylaws, and I hear the board really diving into the nitty gritty about how you're going to implement what the bylaws say. So my actual question would be, does letter A need to be changed? Or can you, in a different venue, figure out how you're going to work the machinations of getting new board members up to speed?
Thank you. I think that's a valuable comment. Do we have any changes that we want to make to the bylaws? Go ahead, BJ.
I do have a bylaw thing.
Cool.
Where it says designate a newspaper. Is that still valid?
Yes, we're required to designate a print media source.
A print media.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm just thinking some digital media.
We are not required to do that. The statute doesn't entertain that as of yet. It may at some point, but it doesn't entertain it yet.
Okay.
And the fact that the Herald is only, printed 5 days a week or published 5 days a week doesn't seem to enter into the conversation. But I know on our local board, we used to designate like the Shrewsbury Times just to get away from the Herald, but that is the paper of record in the area.
So with no objections, our next section is officers of the board. You can see this spells out the specific roles, how to deal with the vacation of a role, and whether or not they can be held concurrently, et cetera. Any opinions about anything in section C? And again, please speak up, just because I can only see about 6 or 7 of you.
I think we're good.
Okay, great. So now we get to the more specific duties of those officers. I can only see, can we see all 3? Almost. So you got board chair, vice chair, and clerk, and I think you can see all the details for each of those roles. Any thoughts on anything there?
We've been talking a lot lately about the board chair's response to questions that are presented to the board and comments that are presented to the board. And I wonder if we need to flesh this out anymore, or if this is enough, because this is pretty much describes what we're doing right now, is that they are the official spokesperson for the board, and we have then arranged how they're going to take on that role. Is that enough? And is this enough? I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah, just an opinion for me, or Maria. I think as the spokesperson is clear, and then that leaves you as a board room to make decisions you made about what a process might be, but you also might want to change that process in the future. So I think the designation and then room to operate is probably a wise approach, just in my opinion.
There was discussion on both our bylaws and actual law or Robert's rules for voting of the chair. And I'm wondering whether B wouldn't be a spot to say the board's right to vote shall not be, whatever, where the board chair's right to vote exists. Does it exist only in the full board meeting? Does it exist in committee meetings? That topic has come up. So,
yeah, I was kind of thinking about that, but I was trying to figure out where it fell before.
It might be in more than one place.
Do we have the rights to overrule? Because I know Robert's rules, the board chair is not supposed to vote in committee meetings, if I'm correct.
Unless we include it in our bylaws.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, so could we add a C?
And that was membership in committees, actually, not just voting.
Why do we need to add this if it already says that their right to vote is not affected by their duties?
I'm just wondering whether we should clarify in what settings that is true, or whether we're going to interpret that as in all settings.
I think we need to specify it, because in Robert's rules, it was specifically they do not have the right to vote.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
specifically here it says they do. So
I didn't see it say didn't. It said what we were talking about months ago. Some board chairs want to attend all the committee meetings, and that's great. But they are not counted as part of the quorum.
unless we put it in the unless we put it in the bylaws.
But
Yeah.
no,
That's how I read Robert's rules.
ex officio. Ex officio is not allowed to be counted as quorum. You can vote, you can talk, you can do what you want to, but you're not the quorum.
But that's the membership piece. And I thought that my reading of Robert's rules was that if we designated in the bylaws that the board chair could be an official member of committees, then you would have all those rights. So let me look it up. But we can go on.
And if you don't find an answer and you'd like us to pursue a legal opinion on that, could certainly pursue that. And
I think, we have a lot of trouble on this board in getting quorums at meetings. I'll just be blunt.
Well, maybe this is a place for to put in the lower down where it talks about committees than up here on board chair, unless we want to say board chair is de facto member of all committees.
I like that suggestion, Maria. Putting it with committees.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Well, just a thought for me. For example, I'm not a member of the finance committee. If I go to a finance committee meeting, I can vote or not. I don't know.
I guess my concern is that right now we have been acting in years past, whether rightly or wrongly, we have been. Like, I am the chair of the negotiations committee. That there's only 3 people on the committee. Right. So if I don't vote and I'm not allowed to be a real member, we don't have a negotiations committee right now.
And honestly, I think I appreciate it, because it is also hard to get people to be at committee meetings because it's a time out of people's day. So if we don't have a quorum unless the chair is there and she's there or he's there, that's a really helpful thing. And there's someone who's very much in tune with the work of the board. So that's not like they're not a valuable member of any committee, because they do have a really important perspective on everything that goes on in the district. They have a closer relationship with the superintendent than any of the rest of us do, necessarily. And I feel like the board chair being a member of any committee or being able to vote on any committee, if they are present, it would be valuable.
I mean, I don't know if I support them being an actual member of every committee, because then if they don't show up and they are counted as an overall member, then that would affect the quorum needed for that committee. But I would appreciate, just personally, being able to be members of committees and having the right to vote. Members, committees of my choice. I attend most meetings just because I do. But
so if you have 4 people and 3 people don't show up, so the board's going to be there, the board chair will be there, and that board chair can vote and the other person can vote. So we have a quorum. And I just disagree. I just totally disagree. I think it's great to have the board chair there to throw in his or her, knowledge and contribute to the problem is getting people to the committee meetings. If that's the problem, we have a greater concern. If we have 3 people on a committee and people don't show up, either virtually or in person, we shouldn't have to fall back on, okay, let's get this one person to go to all of them.
I actually think it's taking away the participation of the board chair, who is probably somebody who's been on the board for a long time and does have information, and forbidding them to vote seems counterproductive to me.
Yeah,
Go ahead, BJ.
Yeah, I'm really thinking I would put it into the bylaws that any member, if I can make it to finance and I'm not a member of the finance committee, I think we are a small enough board and we are busy enough people that we should be able to be counted as part of the quorum and vote. And to me,
that would mean a quorum would be of 11, BJ.
So we can't. So it is.
So we would never have one at a committee meeting.
Yeah.
But you could ask, can the board chair act as a regular member in committee meetings?
Can we get some legal advice here before we try to just punch something in and say, let's make sure we get it right so that, down the road.
But we have to know which direction we're going in, Lynn. Are we asking, can the board chair be a member of an actual member of committees of choice? Everybody on our board can attend any meeting, so it doesn't really matter if the board chair does or not. But can the board be an actual member of committees? I'm very interested in whether or not that's legal.
Yeah, right. I guess that's where I'm trying to go is
Okay.
to ask, legal counsel, what can the
we do
board
that?
chair do and not do or whatever, and that way we can say, if a question comes up down the road, we can say, we checked with legal counsel and they said this and this and this, and then we can put it here.
Yeah, we can revisit it.
I will gladly pursue that.
I
And
think we did
based on
ask
that-
Pietro this question, to tell you the truth. I'm just looking to see.
if the board, as you're looking that up, if the board wants us to pursue something beyond what Adrian finds, my recommendation will be we press pause on this work for now, because the answer will perhaps dictate, future adjustments you make.
I just want to make sure we're doing it right. That's all.
Totally fair.
Vice chair looks good.
Thanks, PJ.
So does the board clerk.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've beaten this section to death.
Okay. So Adrian, if it's okay, I'll pursue a response to that effect unless you find something prior to that. And then you want to press pause on this for the evening?
Sure. Anybody else have object to that? Nope. Okay. Now we get to Town of Clarendon speed limit inquiry.
All right, sharing another screen with you. Board members, I did share this document with you earlier today, along with the COVID response information, in case it feels familiar. My goal was essentially to capture the communication flow on the question for you in one place. But the real meat of the question is at the end of this document. So the document I shared with you previously had the content from the original email from the select board to the district asking for some feedback. My response back to the select board, just speaking to the questions asked. Then another follow-up email with the consensus that you reached in a public meeting, saying that you were in agreement with a 25-mile-per-hour zone near the school, that would be appreciated and welcomed, and that you believe that a full-time speed limit as opposed to one restricted to specific hours was the best approach. That was followed later by, we got an email on the 2nd of December from the select board, $5,400 roughly sign installation estimate. And that request for feedback from the select board is inquiring whether the board would be willing to pay for some of the flashing programmable signs in the Mill River Union School area that would be set according to various protocols at a specific 25-mile-per-hour zone. So I'll gladly be quiet in a moment, but I think it's just important to address, there are a number of questions that are brought up here. The feedback that you provided earlier was about just a consistent speed limit as opposed to one that is governed by activities going on at the school. Another important piece of information that I shared on the document is we did have a topic like this in the town of Wallingford a few years ago. The town of Wallingford approached the school about if you are driving westbound on School Street, kind of heading downhill toward the school, there is a flashing sign there, but East Wallingford friends, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe it's a programmable sign. I believe it's just a flashing sign that draws your attention to a school zone. And
Actually,
the board, Oh,
Yeah, it's kind of related to what I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
It's a shows your speed.
Shows your
sign.
speed. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
And I was going to say that estimate for 5,480 is that type of a sign, because I think that was a very good investment, and I'd love to keep the split.
Yeah, and that's the other point.
This one is a programmable one. So they wanted us to get one that is only activated during certain hours and that we program it for those hours. I agree. One of those flashing signs is a great idea, and I would be wholeheartedly in favor of that. But a programmable one doesn't even meet our needs, because it doesn't, unless we program it constantly for concerts, for sports events, for, you know, when our schedules change, it will not be flashing when we need it to be flashing. A constantly flashing one, or one that shows speed, is a far better investment in my mind. But they didn't give us that option. So I don't know if we go back to them and say, hey, how about a flashing sign that shows your speed? Len?
If I could, yeah. There was a flashing sign, and in fact, they talk about it, that they set up by the lumberyard.
Yeah, the one that they tow in. Yep.
Yeah. And so it was there, and they said that, 85% of the people that went through there were speeding. Yep. And I believe setting up the programmable signs, you know, near the entrance of the school isn't going to do you any good, because by the time the folks get to the entrance to the school, they're slowing down because of the congestion to begin with. My point, and this was my thought all along, is change the darn speed limit on the middle road.
You know, I watched the minutes of the select board meeting, and the ex-sheriff who's on the board, I don't remember his name. He used to work at the courthouse, and a nice man, but I don't remember his name. He suggested that the whole of Middle Road go to 25 miles an hour. And then they pay for some enforcement until people realize that it's 25 miles an hour. And I thought that was great, but he did get shot down, I have to tell you.
Well, and I think if you drive to Woodstock or over to New Hampshire, you know how random the speed limits are, and there's many places where it's 25, and so, you know, even if it's not 25, if it's 30, again, it's not going to matter what the speed limit is if someone's not willing to pay for the enforcement of it. I just know, living on the middle road where I do, and I'm about a mile from the school, unless they're not going to be, by the time they get to the school and get to that flashing light, maybe they'll slow down to 25 because they got to turn into the driveway. But when they zing by my house, they ain't doing 25. So, you know, it was my impression that we just set up a speed limit, or the town set up a speed limit sign, put up a speed limit sign, take the one down that says 40, put up one that says 30, and be done with it.
Maria?
Thanks, Adrian. So I saw somewhere on here that it said we offered to, I mean, what if we offered to help with enforcement rather than signs? Has that been suggested already, or to some degree? I mean, I don't know. I got ridiculously tailgated and like road raged past right in the middle of Clarendon last night on my way to policy. So I know it will take a little bit of people adjusting to a changed speed limit. And I was going the speed limit until they were right on my tail, and then I was going 25.
We could certainly offer to help Clarendon pay for their, because they have a contract with the sheriff.
Okay. I mean, but I feel like there was something about Officer Hoffman in that proposal that we, in something that we said to them. Was that right, Dave? Or am I?
Well, yeah, the response was along the lines of Deputy Hoffman is available to assist in the process. The intent there was not to assist in traffic control. You know what I mean? It was to assist in giving advice and being wise counsel kind of in terms of how speed limits work.
Right, which I think he would be great at. And I feel like he has a relationship with enough people here now at this point that would be helpful. But I wonder, I mean, I do think that was kind of a leap from us saying, oh, yes, we support this, to, okay, you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Chris Burnett has his hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I could say on this whole thing. Coming from a student that's been driving to Miller, I think 2 or 3 years, I think changing the speed limit won't really help much because all the drivers are so used to the set speed limit now. I will have to say, I think the blinking sign when it was by the lumberyard helped more from my point of view. It draws your attention, everything like that. And I feel like just changing the speed limits of the whole road won't have a big enough impact for the majority of the drivers.
Thanks, Chris. Liz.
Yeah, I just wanted to share what, my response was. I watched the select board meeting. I watched it twice. And my thoughts are that I didn't hear the select board members talking about current enforcement. And I believe I watched it twice because I'm pretty sure someone cited 7,417 vehicles recorded going above the speed limit. That's a lot of people speeding on that road, right? And I'm just wondering what does, so we've got that speeding data, but what were the consequences? Were tickets issued? My feeling
Not in that effort.
Right. So my feeling is it's futile. No one's going to notice if you change the speed limit, right? To Chris's point, if folks have been driving 40 miles an hour and speeding going 50 and, someone in the select board meeting, said, 68 and someone was going like astronomically at a high, very, very dangerous speed on that road. Anyway, if the speed limit's been 40 for, I don't know how long, decades, changing it to 25, my suggestion would be that as a first order of business, that we ramp up enforcement of the current speed limit. I'm certainly not opposed to a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit in a school zone for safety. And that does benefit everyone. However, without having seen the data, just based on the select board meeting that was on PEG TV or YouTube or wherever I watch it, whatever you sent us, Adrian, thank you for that. I didn't, it's, the data would have to be disaggregated further. Is it our school community members that are speeding, or is it other people? But I do feel that as a first order of business, that enforcement should be, the first step we take. And then after we've done enforcement for, let's say, a full calendar year, we determine what our next step is. Thanks.
Andrea?
So I have to just say that my road here in Clarendon, the speed limit got changed to 25 because of the fact that it's pretty residential in certain areas. But then we adopted it all the way into Wallingford, and we adopted it down Bump Road. There has been no enforcement, and nobody is going 25. So on this part of it, I drive to and from Wallingford every day and drive up School Street. And I'm honestly, that flashing light gets me every time as I'm trying to slow down to get to 25, regardless if school is in session or not. So I am on favor of reducing or putting the flashing light, but we also have to reinforce it. And I don't know how many times I have sat at the school waiting for my son to get out of school and seen people pull in the parking lot and immediately go right into the parking lot, not loop around where there's the lines and the cone that says you have to go right. So we need to, and I agree with Liz and Len, we need to go on the enforcement part first and then look at, okay, let's put a flashing light. Maybe we'll help pitch in, but it's also between town and school. It's not necessarily just the school that needs to do this. We need to have a kind of joint effort with this one.
BJ?
I'm going to go on the opposite end of this. I don't think our responsibility at all is enforcement. I think that is totally on the town. I will say that I don't know if their flashing light is just one of those lights that's programmable or if it's a speed limit light. So I want to know the difference. If it's one of those that is a speed indicator light, I think that will slow down traffic in the same way it did Wallingford, irregardless of whether we stick with the current speed limit or lower it. So that would be my recommendation, is a speed indicating sign.
Okay, that is not what their programmable sign was, just to only have it be 25 miles an hour when school was in session. So we would program it when we wanted it to be 25. And I thought that was.
Think that will be effective.
No, and if I might, I agree that it's sort of like if you drive up Main Street in Rutland and you go by Christ the King School. They have flashing lights that when school is in session, they blink and say speed limit 25.
Right.
And that's what it does. And you're supposed to slow down. It's programmed. You're supposed to slow down to 25. They're not on the weekends. They're not on in the summer. That's what I believe. That's what Clarendon Select Board is looking at, is that kind of programmable light, and that's why it's costing $5,000.
Yeah, and plus, as I had said, we would have to program it for every event we hold, which would be ridiculous. Maria pointed out that we've gone over time. If I could try and do some kind of a synopsis so we can have Dave answer. There is conversation asking for enforcement first, and then perhaps a sign that actually measures speed and tries to encourage people to follow the speed limit. Sam, and
I would also add, there seems to be pretty big consensus for also having it be constant and not a changing speed limit.
Right. Thank you. Not changing.
And I would like to throw in, as the person who chairs the finance committee, I did notice that the quote was from an out-of-state vendor, and I would much prefer to see quotes if we're even going to consider, and I'm not saying we are or should consider cost sharing, but I think it would be the responsible thing to look at local vendors and not send our taxpayers' money out of state.
Okay. Any other comments? Because then we're going to move on. Okay. Thank you. Committee business, personnel. Len.
Hi there. Our next meeting is January 5th at 6 o'clock. Just to remind folks, we had assignments to work on the superintendent evaluation to send to BJ, which Lenny hasn't done yet, so I don't know about the other folks, but I will. And then we'll continue to work on that evaluation.
Okay, thank you. Policy, BJ.
Actually, really great meeting. A lot of great conversations. And our next one is scheduled for January 11th at 5:30.
Okay. Buildings and grounds, Doug is not in attendance, so I don't believe, is Gary here? Is there anything that we need to know about?
No, we have not had a meeting since the last report that was made.
Okay, and there's no issues that you wanted to
Correct.
bring to my attention. Okay, thank you. Community engagement. Maria, you are here.
Thanks, Adrian. I was not going to be here because of the concert, but I am happy to be here. So we just had a meeting last night after policy, and we talked about several things, the most important being the survey that we mentioned at the last meeting. And we have come up with a draft survey that we'd like to get input from administration from, because we're going to be asking them to be the one that sends it out. And then we will bring that survey back to the board at the next meeting. And just to let you know, the format that we came to on that survey, and Sam especially, would you please interrupt to correct me if I'm not being accurate on this, but it will be very simple. It will be a scale of how do you think we're doing on a scale of 1 to 10. And that will be shared with our community. And that will more just be a pointer to see, we'll have the scale of 1 to 10, and then it will also include identifiers, including what role you play in the community, or roles, say parent, please jump in, parent.
I'm
board
happy
member,
to, if you'd like.
Also,
Yeah, please, Sam, would you
Yeah,
please
so
take this
the
time?
general idea is right. Participation in a survey is quite important, just as much as what the survey is saying. So the idea is to do a fairly regular, simple to answer on a scale of 1 to 10. How would you rate us? And then secondarily, when you're answering that demographic question about yourself, that allows you to take that and see, with, let's say, families of our current students, we are at, we've gone from being rated at a 6 to an average of 7.5. Or vice versa, or our students are rating us at a 10. Just things like that. So it feels like it's a quick survey. It's a pulse on it. It's certainly not comprehensive. Obviously, it's not in depth, and because of that, the hope is that people do get at least completion of that, and it's a finger on the pulse, as it were.
Right. It's accessible and it's easy to do and get done, and ideally will be digital, is what we were thinking. And with those identifiers, then we could focus like who feels like we're not doing well and find out why. And then attached to that survey, this is the important part that was actually really exciting for me, was here's the information in case we're not going to say, tell us all about why you said this or this, but here's where you can go if you care about this or this. So these are the committees, and this is what they talk about. This is the community conversation, and this is what we do there. And it's a great place for you to come to if you want to find out why we made a recent decision, or you want to find out from certain board members what they're thinking about things and where we're coming from. So the information part is pretty much equal to the part where we're gathering information from people, but we're also offering information for people who want to go further and inquire about a specific thing.
Do you want to address how many times a year? We were talking about doing it multiple.
We're talking about 3 times a year. So the one that we're talking about now would ideally be going out, say, in my dream world, in February, so that we could get results back and start talking about them at reorganization when there's a fresh community engagement committee. And then another one in the spring and another one in the fall. Right. And with that, that's about, does anybody, Dave, do you have any questions about that? Or does anybody else have any questions about that? Len, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah. Is it just going to be digital? Because I really feel that you're going to limit the feedback that you get if it's just digital. And again, I speak for Clarendon. The digital piece just doesn't seem to work with the Clarendon residents for whatever the reason may be. So I don't know if there's some thought about having it available at the town halls, having it available like when it's voting time, or have it available at the schools that folks could pick it up. It's just a thought.
I think that's a great thought. I think that's a really important point to make about Clarendon. We're really, what we were talking about the other day was, yeah, what is our audience and how broad do we want to do that? And that's important. What we were talking about at the meeting was right now for it to be people related directly with school. And it might be worth talking to principals about how many families related to school they aren't able to reach digitally, that they have to reach in other ways. And we'll look at that and try to figure that out. But for the most part, the way school's been going, especially since the pandemic, is we are very digitally connected.
And I wanted to point out that doesn't preclude us from doing like that year-end survey that we were talking about in the goals, that would be broader and might need, or might be pointed more at townspepeople.
More up at the dump and more at Hannaford's and more at places like that.
Right.
But we also want to hustle this out because we can keep talking about it. This is kind of like other situations where we've been like, we want to do this thing. And people are like, oh, well, if you do this thing, you have to do it this way and this way and this way. Sometimes you just got to do it and get it done.
And then work on it.
I think that's where response rate comes in as a really like that's the point with improving response rate. So if we do learn, wow, we only got 20% of people that could have responded, then double down on the efforts. I certainly think some effort to, even if it's, here are all the places that in your community you can access a device to do that, and if you can't get to that, I mean, heck, I'll drive someone my iPad if that means they'll do the survey. Hopefully we've all got a handy neighbor. We've got Front Porch Forum or our town centers that hopefully there'd be some way we could first round do that. And then if we see that our response rate isn't good enough, I mean, it can always be better, right? Until it's 100%, doubling down on efforts to get that up for sure.
Like we start the best we can and we keep on trying to get as many people as we can involved in it. But instead of being like, well, we can't because of this and stopping from the beginning, I think it is important just to start.
So, Maria,
sorry,
are you comfortable? I mean, we've warned this as a discussion and possible action.
I don't think it's an action yet. I think it's still a discussion, and we will come back with like a firm form for that we will share as meeting materials at the next meeting, if that's all right. Okay. And if there's any feedback that anybody else would like to give us, anybody who's paying attention to this meeting, please give that.
Okay.
And okay, so for the rest of my report, I would just like to invite everybody to our community conversation that's happening on Monday night at 6:30, and that will be virtual. And wrong tab. And that will be attended at this point, scheduled to be myself, Bjorn, and Sam Green. Does that still work for Sam and Bjorn?
Yes.
BJ?
He's also nodding and thumbs up.
Okay, good. All right, Matt, you're the backup, but it looks like we're good to go. So I will be posting an invitation to the Wallingford Front Porch Forum, and hopefully other school board members will be posting it to their Front Porch Forums as well. And if you would like to attend, please email myself or community engagement at millriverschools.org. And a great time will be had by all. And the next community engagement meeting will be January 11th after the policy meeting. So at 6:30 p.m. In the conference room at Mill River, unless otherwise advertised. Thanks.
Okay. Negotiations update. I don't have one. Ad hoc committee update. So there's two. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
We had a meeting December 7th. We have come up with a survey for folks who have left the district. We will finalize that survey, and then we'd like to bring it to the next board meeting to get it approved so that we can start that process. And then the next meeting is virtual on December 21st at 5:30.
Okay, thank you. Matt, are you on? I know you've been having troubles and I don't see you anymore. Does anybody know if Matt's committee has had a meeting? I don't know who else is on it.
I volunteered. I haven't heard anything yet.
Okay, I think we need to get going on this because I also asked whether or not the statement of inclusion could be, sort of melded into that committee, and I don't want. I'll send Matt a note to try and schedule a meeting. Who else is on that committee?
I had asked to be.
Len, Sam. Okay. All right. We'll figure this out so that that committee starts meeting. Finance, Liz.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. We have the following pay orders for approval. We have payroll dated December 1st in the amount of $6,296.14. We have payroll dated December 2nd in the amount of $569,008.71. And dated December 10th, we have buybacks in the amount of $83,942.57 for a grand total of $659,247.42. For pay orders, we have from the general fund a pay order in the amount of $383,052.10. Also from the general fund, we have a pay order in the amount of $10,308.16. From after school program, we have a pay order in the amount of $1,374.35. Excuse me. And from our lunch program, we have a pay order in the amount of $3,371.87 for a total of $398,106.48. And we do have 2 pay orders from our student activity funds from Mill River. We have a pay order in the amount of $3,740. And from Clarendon Elementary, we have a pay order in the amount of $2,573.33 for a total of $6,313.33. And Madam Chair, I am happy to call the question if you would like.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I do move that we accept and approve payroll and these pay orders as presented.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Well, let's do it as, okay, all those in favor, put your hands up. So Bruce, I don't see a hand up. I do see a hand up, thank you. So it looks like that is everybody, excepting those who are not here, of course. Thank you all very much. And our next meeting is Monday at 5 p.m. We are meeting virtually.
Okay, we have now Transact Other Legal Business. Does anyone have anything that they want to bring up? BJ.
Went by the school the other day, noticed that the Vermont flag was kind of ripped up. Can we get some new ones so those don't look ripped?
Sure, PJ. I believe that's in process. I don't know if Gary can hear me or could give a status update on that.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got one on order. We're just waiting for the new flags to arrive, and we'll get those up.
Okay, on order. I understand that one.
Okay, Maria.
Thanks, Adrian. Well, I don't want to jump the gun on what we discussed last night at community engagement, something about response to people's emails. Are you going to bring that up, or
in terms of
we were discussing
I thought that was sort of the board protocol for responding to communications that we talked about in the goals minutes.
Okay, so it was to do with goals. Okay. I'll leave it. Sorry, I might have been distracted. I'm managing kids and dogs.
Well, I don't think we actually, like spelled it out, but I mean, the expectation is that we're checking our emails, that we're responding when asked for comments, that, that.
Right. I guess the part that we specifically talked about last night was about if there was a board member who had a specific relationship with the person who wrote with a concern to the board.
I wrote that up in my own version, and then I saw that it was in the minutes. So thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with the fact that, the expectation is that the board chair will be responding, but if somebody has a personal connection to somebody, I have no problem with having a designee who would still follow the same process and would not send something without sending it out to the rest of the board first. If it's somebody who's just been contacted singly, then, obviously that's a communication that you're having privately. But if it's gone out to more than one board member, I think following the process that we talked about at the end of the goals retreat is optimum. And I think it's fine if somebody says, hey, I know this person. This board chair is perfectly happy to have somebody else do the communication. But I think, is that okay with everybody? Okay, hearing nothing. Thank you, Maria. I had written it down and that meant it was done. I just didn't share it with anybody.
Thanks, Adrian. I just wanted it spelled out that if somebody else has a relationship with a person, I feel like it humanizes our whole approach, and as long as they get input from the rest of the board, that it would be great for them to communicate.
Still follow the process that we sort of outlined. Anybody else? Okay, I don't see anything. We can do agenda building, and we have the reports on 2 different surveys. Is there other things that people want to see on the agenda specifically? We'll come back to the bylaws piece after we have an answer. Liz?
And this is for our January 5th meeting?
Right. I mean, we'll have finance obviously on and talk about the budget.
Okay, so I was just going to ask that I would like some time to talk about the fiscal year 23 budget.
Okay.
And
Dave,
I have a brief presentation just explaining to our neighbors, what this all looks like on paper and, explaining it.
We'll put you in as a presentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Adrian, we also have a presentation on tap related to part 2 of our student support systems. We did one last meeting, and we'll have another one for you in January.
Yeah. I expect you to put things on the agenda that you're going to report to us on. Does anybody else have a request to have anything on the agenda? I would like to have a quick executive session if people have a few minutes more energy to talk about what we've talked about before, but now we have a few answers. So if, Dave, would you go through the language for staff?
Yes, give me just a second if you don't mind.
It would be good if I just had this stuff written down somewhere. Maybe I could ask you to do that. Send it to me and then I could look for it
if you
too.
would share that with the board, just so we can have it like living in our drive somewhere, that would be great.
Yep, can do.
If you remember when we did the in-service with the Vermont School Boards Association, they gave us a packet of stuff.
I know.
It's in there.
I know.
Is that digitized?
I don't know.
She handed it out. I'm sure it's somewhere.
Yeah, she handed it out.
Okay, maybe can we ask for a digitized copy? So Len, when people give me paper, it goes in the wood stove.
Oh.
Okay.
Well.
Good to know. Thank you.
So Adrian, just could you give me the topic or the area of focus so I can give you the right advice?
Employee pay.
All right. So that would fall under contracts, and related to that, we do need a finding first of premature public knowledge that would place the board at a substantial disadvantage. And after we have that finding, then you would go into executive session to discuss contracts.
Okay. Would somebody make that motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Is there a second? Thank you, Liz. Sam. Could we please have a vote aye, or I guess actually Say nay if you don't agree. Okay, there's nobody that has said nay, and I see lots of hands. Is anybody abstaining? Okay, no. And then could I have a motion to actually enter executive session, please?
I move that we enter into executive session for reasons previously mentioned.
And Sam already has her hand up to tell us that she's seconding it, unless she's frozen, and that's all I see.
Brand new
is that
second.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. I'll do it the same way. Does anybody have an objection to going into executive session? Student members, usually when we're talking about staff issues, certainly in terms of money or any other issues like that, we, I guess, how does the board feel? I would normally say that student members don't come in.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know if people are interested, people that are spectating, or if we need a breakout room. Dave, could you just sort of split us out?
Yes, that was not the approach I was taking, but if you can.
Well, however you wanted to do it.
I was going to send a link to a new meet so that you
That's
can.
fine.
Can
However
go
it works.
let me ask you this though, Adrian. Is there potential for action following the executive session? That would be one question.
Yes.
That I may try, if you'll give me just a moment to organize it, I may try the breakout option. Is that okay with you?
Sure, however it works. All right, so we have exited executive session and we do have a motion to present. Liz?
Okay, does anybody else want to do it?
Yeah, go ahead and you can read it.
Okay. All right. So the first motion is the Mill River Union Unified School District would like to issue a one-time $500 pandemic appreciation and retention bonus payment to current employees based on FTE status and exempting the superintendent.
Exempting, yes. Is there a second? Thank you, BJ. Could I have hands in favor, please? Okay, thank you. That passed. Go ahead, Liz.
The second motion is that the MRUUSD would like to issue a one-time $500 signing bonus to newly hired employees from December 16th, 2021 through June 30th, 2022, based on FTE status.
Okay, Sam is seconding that. Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Okay.
And last, these bonuses, I would like to make the motion that these bonuses be funded using federal ESSER grant money and available surplus funds.
And Sam is seconding that. Thank you. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you very much. With that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, wait,
Oh.
Stan has raised a hand. What did we do wrong? Go ahead, Stan. We should have brought you into executive session, Stan.
No, you didn't do anything wrong. The only question is there a date you want this paid by?
It'd be great if we could pay it by Christmas.
Well, we only have 3 days next week.
Okay. Then by the new year?
And then obviously we've got like maybe 2 days the following week just to do the regular payroll. And obviously
what you can do.
So what would be realistic? Yeah.
Realistic would be probably after the new year, but
okay.
That would
We'll
be
include that in the note to employees.
because obviously we're going to have to go through 200.
Yeah.
At least 200 documents to get them signed and authorized to do the payment. So
yeah, put a little memo, say Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll put in the announcement what the realistic time frame is.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Stan. Okay. All right. Back to motion for adjournment. Okay. I think that was by consensus. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Liz.
Good night.